Welcome back, everyone, to yet another North to South show here presented by Touchdowns to Home Runs. The date is Wednesday, August the 4th, and that means one thing. Welcome to the month of college football. That is right. College football does start this month in August. Obviously, SEC football. Most teams don't start until September the 4th. We have a few teams like we have Ole Miss playing on the Monday after, which would be September the 6th. But for the most part, all the SEC starts that September the 4th date. But having any college football in any month is always a plus. So I am excited to get some of these games prior into the SEC season, get us excited for college football. I'm just excited. Welcome to the college football, the 2021 college football season. Now, a few things about this video. Obviously, this isn't a live show like we usually do. Guys, I explain this every single live show I have the last couple of weeks or whatever. Things are getting pretty chaotic over here, obviously, with me going off to college soon and actually moving the North to South show down south. That is going to be happening in next week. We're actually leaving next week, which is going to be crazy. But just please, I love and appreciate all of your guys' support all the time, 24/7. And I really just need cooperation with this. This is hard for me, trying to fit in all these things on my schedule, trying to fit in seeing my family and friends for the last time. And I got a massive baseball game tonight, all these different things. So please, I appreciate your guys' love and support and cooperation with this whole process with me. But when we finally get settled in, down south in South Carolina, I'm telling you, the North to South show will kick it into another gear. So I love and appreciate from you guys the cooperation. I just wanted to put that out there. But today, what are we going to be talking about today? We have an official starter at LSU. That is right. I don't want to say the quarterback battle has been won because it wasn't really one player outplayed the other one. We all know the Myles Brennan injury, and that means Max Johnson is going to be stepping in. So we're obviously going to talk some Max Johnson here today. And then we're going to finish up with talking about my top 5 storylines for this SEC football season. So lots of great stuff on this North to South show, guys. So sit back, relax, and as always, enjoy. So the LSU Tigers have their QB for this season. Obviously, with the breaking news of Myles Brennan getting hurt in practice, and now he's going to be out for the season. He has to get surgery and everything like that. Best wishes off to Myles Brennan, because obviously you never want to see a guy get injured, especially even if you're cheering for one quarterback in a quarterback battle. You never want the other guy to go down due to injury. So prayers go out to Myles Brennan. Hopefully that's a fast and speedy recovery and that his football career is not affected by that, because he had a really, really good start to last season before his injury, and he was still going to be a great quarterback for LSU this season if he started over Max Johnson, depending on who would have actually won that quarterback battle. But even if he goes and plays elsewhere, he's still going to be a great football player in college football. Now let's talk about Max Johnson, because Max Johnson has been named the starter by Coach O after the Myles Brennan breaking news that Max Johnson will go in as the starting quarterback at LSU. Now, we've seen a bit from Max Johnson last season. Obviously, it went after the Myles Brennan injury happened. It was TJ Finley's role. He stepped in the South Carolina game, and then he kind of took over, started the Auburn game, started like the Alabama game, all those games, Texas A&M. But Max Johnson just went into those games after LSU was getting slapped. He went in kind of in garbage time, and it wasn't until the final 2 weeks, that Florida game, when Max Johnson finally got his first start. And we all know the storyline of that game. You're obviously going to remember that game, not for Max Johnson's performance, because that wasn't the main highlight. The main highlight was obviously Marco Wilson chucking his shoe chucking an LSU tight end shoe 20 yards downfield, which obviously cost the game. And then Cade York steps up, hits a massive field goal to put LSU up top, and then McPherson sails his kick left, so LSU goes out and wins that game. But not enough people talk about what Max Johnson was actually able to do in those final 2 games of the season against Florida. Let's be honest, that Florida team was still number 6 in the country at that point in time. No matter what you can say about Florida's defense, no matter what you could say about the guys they sat that game, no matter what you could say about Florida as a whole last season, they were still the 6th team in the country, and Max Johnson and his LSU Tigers were able to go into the Swamp in a night game and come out with a win there. That is always huge for a true freshman who has only played in garbage time at LSU and got put in to that starting QB role at a really, really rough time at LSU. Like, they were 3-5 at the time. The program was not looking very good. For him to go in as a true freshman, go into the Swamp, and come out with a win there, you got to give the kids some kind of ovation for that, because that is huge. You don't really see that from true freshmen, that kind of maturity and poise to go into a big-time game like that and come out with a win. And then even in the Ole Miss game, he had two really, really good games that both ended out as wins. No matter what you could say about all the games prior, Max Johnson is currently undefeated as a starter, and he is 2-0 against two very good teams. They beat a good Florida team, and they also beat a very, very good Ole Miss team. And in those two games, he threw 6 TDs for 1 interception and threw for over 650 yards. And then on top of that, he rushed for over 90 yards with 2 touchdowns in that. So Max Johnson, if you want to take anything from last season, obviously you could look at kind of the garbage time games, like the Alabama game, the Texas A&M game, the Auburn game, where he kind of got thrown in at the end, and he did decent. He didn't throw any picks in those games. I think he threw 2 touchdowns in total. I'm pretty sure he threw 1 against Texas A&M, and then he had 1 against Auburn. One of them could have been against Alabama. I know one of them was definitely against Auburn, but the kid just limited making really bad mistakes in those garbage time moments and only made 1 mistake, really throwing 1 interception against Ole Miss in the last game of the season. But he still contributed for 5 touchdowns, threw for 3, ran for 2 in that Ole Miss game. So now let's talk about where I see the strengths of Max Johnson being. I think he's got a great arm. Obviously, he's a lefty thrower. I think he's very accurate, and he's just got great arm strength. The guy can fit the ball into really, really tight windows. You go back and watch any of the highlights, especially of that Florida and Ole Miss game, where you could watch him develop throughout the whole game instead of just seeing him get thrown in late in the third quarter, late in the fourth quarter when LSU's just getting beat by 30. If you actually watch him in a game where he's the guy, he's the starter, I think Max Johnson was very accurate, and he shows some great strength there. Another thing that I really like about him is his agility. I mentioned it in the last 2 games. He only rushed for 90 yards, which you talk about rushing quarterbacks. Obviously, they're going to probably rush for over 200 yards if they are a profound rusher. But even though the numbers aren't that big for Max Johnson, you see him constantly getting faced with pressure in both of those games, that Florida and Ole Miss game, and he's just able to escape from it. He's really good at improvising, and I think that that's going to help him greatly at LSU. Even though he has a great O-line this year, you're always going to have to face some kind of pressure. So his ability to improvise, especially when you don't have receivers open downfield, because you still got to go up against a very good Alabama secondary this season. You got to go up against a very good Auburn secondary this season. There are lots of teams that have very good secondaries this season in the SEC that not always your guys are going to be open. So I think that side of Max Johnson is really, really going to help him. Where I think he can improve, I think the deep ball accuracy definitely needs to be there. You saw a lot of missed throws downfield that missed by a couple yards, like some of them weren't even close. He did hit on some. He has the arm strength definitely to get it down the field. It's just he was missing on a couple of them. And then another thing is just accuracy with pressure in the face. He was getting hit a lot in the backfield, and every time that he threw it, it wasn't really close. Now, I'm not coming out here and saying it's easy at all to throw the ball accurately when you have a 300-pound defensive lineman coming in your face, but I think that's what separates good college football quarterbacks from great college football quarterbacks, and I think that's what Max Johnson is really shooting for. So seeing him throw a bit more accurately with pressure in his face, but you see him when he's standing back there going throughout his progressions and everything, even when he's on the move, this kid has this arm strength and this kid has the accuracy to be something really, really special at LSU this season. So talking about what I think about Max Johnson this season and where I really see him going about at LSU and how successful I think they're going to be, let's not forget that LSU was the 15th best passing attack in all of the nation. This isn't just SEC. Obviously, it can't be SEC because there's only 14 teams currently in the SEC. Obviously, we're going to get 2 more, but we've talked enough about that. 15th in the nation in passing game. You look at all the problems for LSU last season, it was mainly in the defense. The defense was not great at all. They finished like dead last in passing defense, but in passing offense, they were 4th in the SEC, 15th in the nation. This team is already set up to be very, very successful in the passing game. So you give Max Johnson a whole summer practice, so they just started recently in August. You're giving him this whole time as being the guy, getting first team reps, getting all this stuff, working with his guys because this is now his team. And I think you're going to see Max Johnson way more confident and comfortable than you did see him in those garbage time games, in those games where he's just thrown in towards the end of the season when LSU wasn't really playing for anything. So I think Max Johnson getting this time and him being the starter now and not having to go through a QB battle, I think ultimately is going to really, really help him. Don't be surprised if you see this kid go out and be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. I'm not calling him a top 5 quarterback in the SEC right now because I thought Miles Brennan was up there. I think Miles Brennan was right on the cusp of 5. I still think Max Johnson at least is at 8 for top quarterbacks in the SEC, but that's because we just haven't seen very much of him. He kind of reminds me of a Luke Doty. Now, Luke Doty obviously was in a much worse situation in South Carolina. I think it's safe to say back last season than what Max Johnson was in. And obviously Max Johnson has the 2 wins under his belt. But both of those guys are guys that we know have the talent to become something really special in the SEC. People just rank them really low because you haven't seen enough of them to call confidently where you're going to see these guys in the SEC quarterback rankings. And I think that's where people are going to think Max Johnson at the beginning of the season is really going to struggle because you just haven't seen much of him. And the games that he did play, they weren't really big-time games. Like the Ole Miss one, I'm not sure how many people tuned into that, but it wasn't like some big-time SEC game that decided who's going to win the SEC West. Now, the Florida game, kind of a different story, but people were going into that thinking Florida was absolutely going to blow LSU out, and obviously Max Johnson comes in there. So we just need to see Max Johnson get his first team reps, go in with his team. And you look at this team that he has around him. You look at all the talent that he has around him. I think he's got a top 5 SEC O-line with him. The wide receiver core is going to be great. Obviously, you got Kayshon Boutte, who's going to be one of the best wide receivers in all of college football. You look at guys like Corey Moore. You look at guys like Jaray Jenkins. You look at guys like Trey Palmer. LSU's got a great wide receiver core this year. Tons of talent going to be surrounded by Max Johnson. And I think that we're going to see a huge test of how good Max Johnson is going to be and a huge see of how good Max Johnson is going to be in that first game when LSU travels to UCLA in week 1. Going to be very interesting because he is going to be the starter in that game. But honestly, that's all I'm going to say. Do not be surprised at this Max Johnson kid. If he works on all those things that I said he needs to work on, the deep ball accuracy, if he gets better at that, if he gets more comfortable with his team, obviously now that he's going to be getting first team reps and everything like that, works on getting pressured in the face and being able to throw accurately with pressure in the face, I think this Max Johnson kid is going to do some special things at LSU this year. So I'm really, really excited to see what Max Johnson is going to be able to do at LSU, and really, as a whole, excited to see what this LSU team is capable of this year, because we know that this team could go as high as the moon, but also drop as low to the depths of the ocean. So very excited to see what Max Johnson has in store this season at LSU. Now, all college football seasons kind of have a storyline going into each and every season. Obviously, last season was the big COVID storyline. Is the season even going to go on? And as the season did go on, what conferences are going to play and when are they going to play and all this kind of stuff? How is the college football playoff going to work out? That was kind of last year's storyline. But what I want to do in this segment is give you guys my top 5 best storylines for the SEC this season, because I think college football as a whole has the greatest storyline of any sport so far in all of pro sports. You could talk about amateur sports. There's no other league that has a better storyline right now than college football, because I think flat out college football has the most going on in it right now. Even though it is the quote unquote off season, we're just getting into preseason now. There is more going on there than there was even in the NBA finals, even in the NHL finals, even with the MLB going on. College football is drawing some major attention, and you're finally going to have full stadiums back and everything this year. NIL is coming to play. You got teams moving to the SEC. There's so many different storylines going into the SEC this season that I have to break them down. So I'm giving you guys my top 5 storylines for the SEC this season. I'll give an honorable mention first, because this is one that is definitely not on here. There's 2 teams that I think have great storylines this season. I think the rebound of LSU, the team that we just talked about, obviously, with Max Johnson. I think the rebound of LSU will be an amazing storyline, because you don't know if this team's going to bounce back or they're going to stay down like they did last season. So I think how Coach O responds to last season is going to be a great one. And then, is Florida able to keep the momentum up from last season? Obviously, this team won the SEC East last season. It's going to be a team that is hungry for more, but after all the exits, are they still going to be as competitive as they were last season? So those are definitely 2 big storylines that I'm going to be looking out for, but just made it short out of my top 5 list. So starting off at my number 5 spot in the SEC for best storylines, I have the 4 new head coaches coming into the SEC, trying to turn these big-time programs around. Obviously, you're talking Tennessee. Josh Heupel comes into Tennessee. You got Brian Harsin coming into Auburn. You got Shane Beamer coming into South Carolina. And you got Clark Lee going into Vanderbilt. Seeing how these guys do in their first year, it's something that's always entertaining in a conference, especially when you get 4 new head coaches. We had 4 new head coaches last season. We're getting 4 more this season. Could be another honorable mention. How did the second-year head coaches do? But I'm really excited to see how these 4 new head coaches, first-year head coaches in the SEC do, because because obviously I'm a big South Carolina fan. I cannot wait to see Shane Beamer hit the field and his team hit the field. But also rebuilding Tennessee. Will Tennessee be able to get back to the competition level that they want to get to? How about Auburn? Because Auburn has been competitive over the years. They just haven't got over that hump with Gus Malzahn going on and winning an SEC championship and making a college football playoff. They just hadn't got there. Is Brian Harsin the guy to now get them to that level? Vanderbilt. Are they going to win a game in the SEC this season is another big storyline for Vanderbilt. And you talk about these 4 new head coaches. Clark Lee's really building from the bottom up because this was a winless team at Vanderbilt last season. So you got a lot to work with there. And then South Carolina. Can South Carolina become one of the most premier programs in all the SEC East? So lots of great storylines going around there. And that's what I have at my number 5 spot for biggest storylines. My number 4 spot, I have will Alabama be dethroned this season? And this is more looking at your Texas A&M, your Georgia, and your Florida. Are either of those 3 teams going to be able to beat Alabama this season? Obviously, Florida gets Alabama week 3. They come to the Swamp. And then I'm pretty sure in week 6, Texas A&M gets Alabama at home, which is going to be the quote-unquote premier game of the SEC regular season. So far, that's what it's talked about right now. Lots of great stuff to be talked about there. After Alabama has the turnover that they had last season, is this team going to be just as competitive as they were last season? Or do these teams like Texas A&M and Georgia, because many of their fans believe that this is the season that they will finally dethrone Alabama? Now, it's not set in stone that Georgia will play Alabama this season, but many people have predicted that that will be the SEC championship, as myself. So I see that game happening. Or maybe does Texas A&M think that they have them finally cornered in Kyle Field in that week 6 spot, and they're going to come out with a win there? So the whole fact of will Alabama finally be dethroned in the SEC is a great storyline coming into the season, because there's multiple teams that think that this is their season to go out and win the SEC. My number 3 spot, I don't know how to talk about this one because this isn't directly SEC. It is, but it isn't. You'll hear what I have to say. My number 3 one is watching Texas and OU go on the road in the Big 12. And you could also throw in there just the Texas-Oklahoma game alone, because you're talking about the 2 teams that are making the move to the SEC right now. It is set for 2025. Many people believe that that is going to be sooner. It just all depends on how the TV contracts and everything like that works out. But this kind of reminds me of the Houston Astros coming back to Yankee Stadium for the first time when they've actually got fans back, first of all, after the whole cheating scandal, because that's what I'm feeling here. If you watch the highlights of just that limited capacity game in New York City when Houston went back to New York after the cheating scandal, that when the Astros beat the Yankees in the ALCS, it was a raucous atmosphere, and it was a very hostile atmosphere, one that you did not want to go into if you were an away fan. I just cannot believe, I can't even see it right now, what these atmospheres are going to look like when Texas and OU go on the road to these Big 12 stadiums, because they're basically diminishing the conference, and they all know that. They all know that the Big 12 is coming to an end. I cannot wait to see how the reaction is by your Iowa States, by your TCUs, by your West Virginias, by your Kansas States, by all these different teams, your Baylor, your Texas Tech, all these different other Big 12 teams. I cannot wait to see how hostile the environment is when Texas and you go into those stadiums. And even talk about the Texas OU game is going to be something very interesting when you have 2 teams who are making the switch to the SEC. It's basically going to be an SEC game. They might as well throw that game on CBS. You could do a triple header. I think that's what CBS has to do. They got to do a triple header, because you have Texas, Oklahoma at noon that day. Then 3:30, you're going to have Georgia, Auburn. And then at night, you're going to have the Texas A&M, Alabama game. Man, CBS would make a ton of money off of that. So just switch Texas and Oklahoma over to the SEC early. Get that on CBS and have the blockbuster Saturday that we all want on October 9th. I'm pretty sure it is. My number 2 slot is the rise of Bryce Young. The rise of Bryce Young is going to be one of the greatest storylines in college football this season, because he is talked about as being the next great college football quarterback. Now, it's weird to talk about the rise of this kid because he's already had 1 year under his belt in Alabama. Now, he didn't play any meaningful snaps under Mac Jones. Obviously, Mac Jones was able to take Alabama to the national championship last season and win it, and Bryce Young just really went in garbage time, and when Alabama was killing all the other teams and just threw him in at the last second. But Bryce Young is already talked about as being a Heisman favorite and one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. And this kid only really has 2 years left, because if it goes according to plan, I think Bryce Young will enter the NFL draft after next season. But Bryce Young if you've heard the news of the NIL and all that kind of fun stuff, this kid is already making 7-digit numbers off of NIL. It is crazy. This kid, we already know, is the real deal. Hasn't even started a game at Alabama, so there is going to be a lot of talk around him and a lot of expectation around him. Watching him play and watching his storyline unravel, if he really does become one of the best quarterbacks of all time in college football, is going to be really exciting. And if he is able to get this Alabama team back to a playoff and back to a national championship, Bryce Young, even though you may not think about it and you're just sick of hearing Bryce Young's name right now, especially from the national media, Bryce Young will be one of the most followed storylines in all of college football the whole season, 110%. My number one storyline for this season is the comeback of the fans. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about you. I'm talking everyone, a part of your fan base. I cannot wait to see fans back in the stadium. Look, going back, when was it? Last Friday, I finally got to go to my first sports game in about 1.5 years because of COVID and everything. My Toronto Blue Jays came back home and played in Toronto. I was at 3 of their first 4 games, including their first game, and we only had 15,000 there. Our stadium holds 50,000. The Rogers Center holds 50,000 fans. We were only allowed to have 15,000 people. The atmosphere there, I tell you, just with sports back in Toronto. Now, I know if you're American, obviously you've had fans in stadiums for the last year, it seems like, and we only just got ours back. But that atmosphere alone with those 15,000 people cheering on the Blue Jays in a middle of the season, regular season game. Yes, it was their first game back. It was unbelievable. The atmosphere was amazing. I can't even begin to imagine what it is going to be like that week 1 game, Clemson, Georgia in Charlotte. I cannot begin to imagine what it's going to be. That week 3 game, Alabama, Florida. That week 6 game, Texas A&M, Alabama. When you have LSU and Alabama go at it. South Carolina's first game with Shane Beamer there. You're going to have all these big-time SEC matchups and big-time storyline games where these fan bases haven't been able to all collectively cheer as one in the stadium as a full capacity crowd. So I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see and feel the energy of the crowd from any team. It is going to be honestly such a beautiful sight seeing these fans back in the stadium as one. Yes, you had fans back last year, but you talk about a quarter of a Death Valley in LSU. You talk about a quarter of a Neyland Stadium. You talk about a quarter of a Williams-Brice Stadium, a quarter of Jordan-Hare Stadium. You talk about a quarter of Sanford Stadium, all these big-time SEC stadiums, quarter of Bryant-Denny. It's not the same when you have 100,000 people in there. It is not the same at all. So that is the number one storyline by far. No questions asked this season in the SEC. No matter what's going on with Texas, Oklahoma, no matter what's going on with Alabama this season, no matter what's going on with the new head coaches, NIL, playoff expansion, transfer portal, all of this other stuff, nothing will be as sweet this season in the SEC and really in all of college football as getting fans, full fan capacity back in a stadium. So those are my top 5 storylines in the SEC this season, guys. And that is going to be our show for today. So again, always appreciate you guys tuning in. I cannot guarantee that there will be a live show next week. Really busy again, packing up and everything, saying goodbye to people. But I will keep you guys updated and probably do another pre-recorded show. So thank you guys for tuning in. Like down below, share this video, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and definitely come back next time.